Okay. So,
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, gentlemen, to our weekly podcast, 3 Shots of Espresso. This week, inshallah, we'll be speaking about basically knowledge, the pursuing of learning and knowledge. So we've titled our show Cradle to the Grave, Learning Islam in Life, or Islam Learning in Life. And this week, really what we're going to be speaking about is the pursuit of knowledge within Islam, but given our own lives and lifestyles in the context in which we are living in today in the 21st century. All three of us have been on some interesting, let's say, journeys of knowledge, pursuing a particular path. And perhaps we can open up a discussion about the whole concept of knowledge within Islam, its place, its significance, the impact that it has on the Muslim world, what the Muslim world has given over to humanity in general, and also what should be a Muslim's attitude towards learning, knowledge acquisition, constant upskilling. So this should be an interesting discussion, inshallah. Firstly, how are you guys doing? It's good to see you people, and welcome back.
Yeah, good to be here, Sayyidi Anwar, and with Maulana Zakariya once again. Really looking forward to the discussion. It's a topic I think that we all three have been chomping at the bit to get into. So yeah, going well. On the cusp of the weekend. I think when the Thursday comes, they say it's quarter to weekend. So all good, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, this is definitely one we've been wanting to speak about for a while. I think that's also how we all know each other. It's been through the pursuit of knowledge itself. I mean, if I remember correctly, Mohammed Ismail, I met you via one of my teachers, Maulana Abdullah Abrams, and Sheikh Zakariya, I met you actually in Cairo when you came over for, I think, your Al-Azhar exams during one of the years. And that's how we met. So, yeah, it's basically been in the pursuit of knowledge that we actually met. Yes, we are talking about Islamic learning.
I think so. That's how myself and Mohammed Ismail also met.
Yes, alhamdulillah, through teaching and through learning. Yes.
Yeah, learning Muslim.
Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. So, be that as it may, right? We know throughout our lives, we know that Islam as a way of life is one that's grounded in knowledge. It's a knowledge-based deen, a way of being, a way of life, a religion, right? Islam highly praises knowledge and the acquisition of knowledge, seeking knowledge. It makes the differentiation between beneficial knowledge and non-beneficial knowledge, superfluous information. It really regards knowledge that is acted upon as the real knowledge, because that's where you achieve experience, that's where you achieve life lessons, and it's also through real application that you draw closer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by acting on knowledge. Because to seek knowledge is basically to seek a path towards Allah. It's to seek God Himself, right? Maybe you guys can touch on some of the significance of knowledge itself, knowledge, learning.
Yeah, Maulana Zakariya, would you like to go first?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, one of the things that I wanted to mention is that, especially in recent experience of mine with some of the works of the academic scholars that you read, you find that you start to see that the religious tradition of Islam is very rich. And it represents obviously the experience of Muslims for over 1,400 years. And what Allah has given Muslims in terms of commands, the hermeneutical process, discovery, what people are saying in relation to what this could mean, what this text could mean, what Allah is saying here, or what God is saying, or what Allah is saying, what are the commands. And I find that one of the most interesting aspects for me of knowledge is that in order to understand your own knowledge for your personal self and to fortify it and to really get to understand, you have to interact with other religions, or at least observe other religions and give a chance and listen to what other people are saying within Islam and within like Muslim writers and non-Muslim writers. And my reason for this here is, for example, you have the hadith of the Prophet, which is the reports of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the more you look at those who criticize the reports and whatever, it makes you stronger because your research gets more deeper. And you would have never. So there's a refutation which was written by Mustafa Al-Azmi, refuting Joseph Shah on the origins of Hadith, or on the origins of Islam. And you ask yourself, would Mustafa Al-Azmi have written this refutation? And so my point is, firstly, that knowledge is such a thing that you have to be open-minded, and also you have to be somebody who is willing to be humble in terms of, before you judge, open up your mind and let the person who is either for or against, give him a careful ear. And then after that, then see now how you're going to approach this matter. So for me, knowledge it's such a vast, such a vast field of just, interacting with different scholars. And the second thing is also, I feel that it is also important for non-Muslims to read about Islam so that they could understand their religious matters, and they could understand how they see, how Muslims look at the world, and that could also then cause them to reflect on the way they're looking at the world. So, subhanAllah, this knowledge is just, for me, that is the point that I wanted to make, that, it's just a vast ocean of knowledge. Yeah, I think so. That is the point that I wanted to make.
You talk about the vast ocean of knowledge, and I can't help but reflect to some of the giants that we've mentioned. And it's said very often when we meet good scholars and scholars that are deep in their thinking, broad in their approach, very intellectual, very academic, but at the same time humble. We say that he or she was an ocean of knowledge. And one such ocean that we all have met, and he's now late, our great Sheikh, Maulana Taha, rahimahullah, Taha Karan. He was one such person who epitomized what knowledge really was, both in its understanding and its acquisition, as well as its application. And when we were talking about how we got together, it reminded me of 2011, I think it was, when the late Sheikh rahimahullah came to Johannesburg, and we had a program with him where we invited other scholars to come and partake, and he was going to lead sort of the discussion. And he mentioned something in the beginning. He said that, he would like the discussion to be as informal as possible, لأن العلم نسب يربط بين أهلي, because knowledge is a link, it is a sort of a familial tie that links people who bear it. And he was one such person that we saw. So when you look at people that were oceans of knowledge and really what it meant to acquire and to hold knowledge, definitely he was some amongst others, of course, and our scholarly tradition and the tradition of the world at large has produced many intellectuals, whether it is in also the Islamic field and also in other fields. We have to give recognition where it is. The last point I'll make about knowledge, and Sidi Anwar asked about the benefits of knowledge and the stature of knowledge. I would like to, something that I always recall, and it's entrenched in my mind, Imam al-Shafi'i, as was quoted from him, that he said, knowledge is of two types, al-ilmu ilman. Knowledge is of two types, ilmu al-tibbi lil-abdan wa ilmu al-fiqhi lil-adyan. That knowledge is of two types, knowledge of jurisprudence to facilitate your faith and your religious practice, and knowledge of medicine, because that is to keep the body healthy. And then he said, وَمَا وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ بُلْغَةُ مَجْلِسٍ. And this was something many years ago, I didn't understand it. But as time goes on, and just like us, and I mean, I reflect on us all the time, how when we meet and we speak, we're only speaking about the things. I mean, Sid Anwar and I have never spoken about soccer and cricket. I don't think we have, or at least not the predominant discussion.
Occasionally,
is not about
occasionally golf, which you're very bad
Yes.
at, but most of the time we stay away from that,
Exactly.
from that subject.
So-
Yeah. It's
So
pretty
when
traumatic, actually.
Exactly. So when Imam Shafi said bulghatu majlis, it means like it's just things for conversation. It just makes for good conversation. So anything else, any other knowledge besides fiqh and tib or medicine and jurisprudence is just by the way, just for good conversation. And really, it's understood in our context. When we speak about other things, it's really not as stimulating as when we engage in discussions of religion or even discussions of jurisprudence or discussion of things that affect us in the world. And I mean, we're going to be discussing it tonight. The understanding of religion is not only got to do with that which is associated with worship per se, the actual physical worship. So yeah, we'll discuss that a bit more. But yeah, that's my sort of opening remarks.
Look, I mean, in our community generally, the idea of learning is prized, and I think wherever you find Muslims, you're going to have this here. The idea of acquiring is let's say Islamic knowledge, knowledge of the deen rather, whether it's theology, it's jurisprudence, it's history, all the different subjects, tafsir of the Quran, knowledge of the hadith, it's always highly prized, right? There's no doubt about that. Generally, the mainstay of Muslim society has been a society that has prized learning, right? So when you look into the history of Islam, you look at both the
I think we've lost Anwar there.
Yeah.
Manana Zakariya. Manana Zakariya, we're getting some feedback. Do you perhaps have your Facebook Live on or something like that? I can hear us in the background.
I offed it.
Yeah. Okay.
I took off. Yeah.
Maybe Anwar will join us shortly. So maybe let's continue then, Mulana. Some points to build on your point.
What did you get on my point of? Did you understand the point that I was trying to get at?
Look, I think when you spoke about it there, I to be honest, no, I didn't. I didn't get it. So maybe you want to replay it in another way. I didn't get it entirely.
Okay, so what I was trying to say was that, speaking about just when you look at a knowledge, you have to, because sometimes somebody would only focus on, for example, Islamic texts or Islamic books or Islamic writers, Muslim writers, and you don't focus on other writers who maybe are not Muslim, for example, and have written on these subjects. And it's important for you because it helps you then to identify of what you already know. And it makes you research more deeper to understand what you already know, and you can break it down more better. Because once you understand these criticisms, that takes you now back again, Like, for example, sometimes you have an understanding of hadith, but now what this helps you is sometimes you find that criticism takes you into such deep research where you're now studying the names of the narrators, you're studying their dates, you're studying where they came from, you're studying with who they're associated, whether they were at that time as it is said, and then you research now the place that they came from, the year that, you know, like for example, Imam Bukhari has something which he terms al-liqa, the meeting. It's very important for him that scholars had to meet. So now you then get to study the dates. So basically what I was trying to say was that for me, knowledge is, firstly, it is, you know, getting to understand the hermeneutic process of how knowledge came to us, you know, how all of this information came to us. And at the same time, the second thing is that it's so important for you to have an open mind when you are studying knowledge. I think so that breaking it down and just summarizing it, to have an open mind when you're studying knowledge.
Indeed, indeed. Anwar, Jazakallah khair. I think you're back with us. Maulana and I were just continuing. I said to Maulana, I didn't grasp completely what you were saying in the initial points, but I think he's unpacked it quite nicely now. Really, the dynamism of how knowledge has come through and what it really meant to past generations and how it's reached us. Before you left, you were making a point. Sorry that we lost you there. I'm sure you would like to apologize also to the listeners and the viewers. These things do happen.
My apologies. I really don't know what it was. Maybe it's gremlins in the fiber, but anyway, right?
It could be that you were making fun of me last week when mine went.
Yeah, but like I say, it's okay to be temporarily disconnected, you know, technologically, just not permanently disconnected spiritually or intellectually. That can happen.
Yes, indeed. May God protect us.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, sometimes you can be reading the word of God and not even hear the voice of Allah himself while you're reading the Quran. You know, you can be swimming in the ocean of knowledge, reading all of the works of all of these giants, past and present, because it's, the knowledge tradition within Islam is really not just a memorial of the dead. It is a celebration of life, right? And you may not be able to see their wisdom. It's possible, right?
Indeed.
So anyway, yeah, those are my shots for tonight, right? So what I was talking about is that as a community generally, learning knowledge is highly prized, right? Because Islam has placed a great emphasis on knowledge, on learning, right? Teachers are oftentimes respected. The person seeking knowledge is oftentimes honored, right? So the idea of, like, let's say adabut ta'alim wa ta'allum, there's an entire, like, let's say, adab and etiquette, social decorum about how do you go about seeking knowledge, how do you go about teaching itself. And this is not just about, you know, politeness, it's also a state of mind, right? But there's a disconnect right now in Muslim community. We do have a crisis of knowledge within our community, right? When I look at my own community, and this might be your experience as well, I often lament, and, you know, one of my teachers in his book Islam and Secularism, and while I was studying this with my teacher, Sheikh Dr. Hisham Helia, he said, you know, he spoke about this imbalance, and in my mind, what I seen was, you know, let's say one level of learning and knowledge, and then I seen another level of learning and knowledge, and there's this imbalance. I hope you guys can get the graph, the hand gestures, right? So currently what's happening is that while Muslim community generally does prize knowledge, Islamic learning, and we know that you can't live out the deen without a certain amount of knowledge. You know, just to make a theological statement of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, yes, it makes you a Muslim, but to act out Islam, to let's say, to live out this message of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, it requires a certain amount of learning, right? But the world in which we live in is one where, for example, in our communities, oftentimes right now, because there is a crisis, this is the crisis of knowledge, is that you have very sophisticated levels of, let's say, of knowledge, of learning, of, you know, of the things that people are involved in on a daily basis, let's say their professions, right? To very high levels, postgraduate levels, or even for entrepreneurs, their knowledge of how to run a business is very, very sophisticated. Knowledge which they acquire formally or informally and via experience, right? But their understanding of Islam is really, really low. So it's the things, those essential elements that they learned while they were children, attending basically an afternoon maktab or madrasa class, right? Where they learn the very essentials, right, of the deen, like the essential aqidah of Islam, the basic history of Islam, how to read Quran, basic tahara, how to pray your salah, about Sawm, about zakah, about Hajj, right? Some of the seerah of the Muhammad of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And but you know, that's really where it stops, right? Obviously, yes, you're always encouraged to learn more, but that disconnect does exist. The ability to bridge those that disconnect, sometimes it's not there, right? In most of the time, I feel it's not there, and I feel that's part of the crisis of knowledge that we're facing, because the Muslim community has been blessed with talent, as far right, and especially within the South African Muslim community, it has great financial resources, and we are a generous community, alhamdulillah. But it also has great human resources in terms of knowledge and experience, right? But where we is basically to bridge between knowledge and dreams relating to this life, right? Connected with Islam. So Islam can only be practiced at the level of ritual, because ritual is all that we understand, right? You're wrong. This fard and the fara'id must be executed, right? There's no escaping that. But I feel that there is this gap, this wide gulf that exists, like when in learning, and oftentimes, you know, when people think about when studying Islam, what it means for a lot of people, it means like stop your entire, you can't pursue anything else besides studying Islam, you know, on a full-time basis, and becoming an alim or an alima, and then when you graduate, you'll get a title, you know, Sheikh, Maulana, whatever it may be, and then, you know, that's your pursuit in life. That's how can I say, your path in life. That you can't be a person who's living a life where, for example, you're a person of multiple learning. You know, you have studied Islam on the one hand, and you have studied something else, and you combine the two things together, and that contributes to, let's say, you being a much more fuller a human being. You know, a person that's much more developed. There isn't that understanding, you know, the majority of the time within our community, and I feel it's a problem. But and here's really where you have to come in, Mohammed Ismail. You can tell us about your journey of knowledge, because you've never studied Islam full time, but you have studied Islam, and you're continuing to do so. And what it's been, maybe over 10 years that you've been doing this. So maybe you can tell us how you didn't stop life to continue your Islamic studies.
Yeah. Look, I really don't want to talk about myself that much, but I think just on knowledge is that we need to clarify that when we're referring to knowledge here, it's in the broader sense. Lest someone tell us that, you know, we're only focusing on religious knowledge. That's generally what people say. But what we would like to say in that point is that everything that connects you to God, and if you're able to see God in the sciences that you're studying, in the faculties in which you have enrolled, and you are able to stay grounded in your link to that which is the universal truth, you know, the oneness of God, and you're able to see the beauty in it, then I think at a minimum, you can say that what you are pursuing is noble to the extent that it helps you to become a better person. It doesn't help you to, you know, now become a treacherous person or takes you away from God. So many of the sciences, and I mean, for a long time, people have grappled with this terminology that is there something such as secular sciences? And the idea of secular sciences was then brought in to say everything that is done, for example, in a madrasa and in a Darul Ulum is religious and therefore true, and everything that is done elsewhere is called secular, because secularism is that in which there is no God and in which there is no religion, and it's actually in fact taking you away from religion. So I think that understanding if it's looked at from that perspective, is just too easy to do that, and it's much more sophisticated than that. Things like the social sciences, the human sciences, the medical sciences, even the sciences of economics and finances. To such an extent that yes, the majority and the dominant system in the world is the interest-based system of the economies of the world. Irrespective of that being the fact, we still are operating within a structure. So someone needs to know how to do VAT, and someone needs to know how to do tax, and someone needs to know how to run a business and do cash journals and debits and credits and so forth. And many things can be said, and I don't think it's our point of view now to go into each one of them and prove or even demonstrate to a minimum how even philosophy has its merits, and how medicine has its merits, and how political science has its merits, and so forth. So I just wanted to say that. And then secondly, just in my own journey, I think what I would like to say about it is that we really need to develop a passion for self-development. And I'm not saying that I've mastered that or I've achieved it in any way, shape, or form, but I think it was just the passion to say, I don't want to accept my current circumstances, not having, had particular resources or potentially resources that could have allowed me to go full-time into any form of study. The idea was that irrespective of that, let me use every opportunity to learn. Let me use every opportunity to continue to grow and allow my passion and my goals and my objectives to remain primary. And in doing that, in whichever way, shape, or form I would try to achieve it, I will go and look for which is the easiest way to facilitate it in my life as I currently stand. And that's why just to reflect on the primary days of my study just after school, and really wanted to study Arabic. And I'm just going to touch on this, and this I'll talk about from my perspective, because I think it's one of the points that I'm most passionate about. There was no facility for someone coming out of school, going into university, going into the world of work, that was really set up to teach people how to read and understand the Quran, how to read and understand Arabic. And what I found myself in the mid-2000s doing was searching online. And back then I came across an online program called Sharia program, and it was run by, he's still alive now, may Allah protect him and preserve him. He's done great amount of work in this field of online learning, Mufti Yusuf Mullan. And at that time, it wasn't easy. We had to get up according to the times in Canada. So sometimes classes would be at 3 a.m. in the morning because it was 4 p.m. in the afternoon there, and so forth and so on. But I think the journey was that online platform already appealed to me in those days. And I'd like to say that I was one of the pioneers in terms of the people in my circle that I was learning or trying to learn actually online in the probably around 2004, 5, 6, there and thereabouts. So I'll just finish off by saying that it's just coupled with a deep desire to achieve something, because knowledge is that which gives you a better sense of the world. Knowledge is what empowers you. Knowledge is what gives you the ability to pursue what you want to do and to do it correctly. Because like we know, لا تقف ما ليس لك به علم, says the Quran, that you should not pursue that which you do not have any knowledge of. So even some of the scholars said, we won't even answer a jurisprudence question unless we've read it in the last 3 days. And that's just to show us the importance of knowledge, and knowledge that is applicable, knowledge that is practical, knowledge that can draw you closer to God. Maulana Zakariya maybe has a few stuff.
Very, very interesting.
So there was 2 things which I observed from and appreciated from what Sidi Anwar was saying. One is that I looked in some of the works of, and this is what regards to most of the scholars. Most of the scholars, you will find that they, that's why they have the saying in Arabic, تعلم عن كل شيء شيء وعن الشيء كل شيء. So تعلم عن كل شيء شيء وعن الشيء كل شيء. So learn, so specialize in what you specialize in, but then also educate yourself in everything else. Have at least an understanding of that. And I was looking at, I went through the Baytul Hikmah period of Ma'mun al-Rashid, which was called the House of Wisdom. and which ran through the 9th to the 13th century. And one of the things that I was reading was, for example, you get somebody like Muhammad al-Idrisi or Muhammad ibn Zakariya al-Razi. And these scholars, firstly, they call them polymath, meaning that they also learned, they knew various subjects. And then what was amazing was that he wrote, he was a physician, he was a philosopher, he wrote in logic, and then he also wrote in Arabic grammar. So, and that is what Sidi Anwar was saying, that you could be an engineer. For example, his specialty was medicine. You look at some of the scholars, their specialty was mathematics or whatever. And then it didn't just stop there. They studied other subjects, and sometimes they were even masters in those subjects. And the second thing that I wanted to say was that just something which I think is contributes towards the problem is for us to facilitate, whether it's in the masjid or whether it's scholars doing workshops continuous, like how we would discuss and how we see in Egypt. Because even when I was living in the village in Abu Qair in Alexandria, what would happen was that the AlKauthar would designate a scholar who would come, for example, Mondays it would be Hadith, Wednesdays it would be Tafsir, Fridays it would be, for example, Fiqh, and Sundays it would be, for example, Usul. And these scholars, different scholars would come, and the masjid was packed. And like you were telling us, Sidi Anwar, it's not just students, no. And that's why in Egypt, I think so. If Sheikh Abdullah Gangat will remember, we were a few students sitting in the taxi going to the Al-Azhar University, and this driver hears us speaking English, and he's just listening to us, and and then he says, "Antum minen," where you're from. So we say Janub Africa, from South Africa. MashaAllah, and what a sometimes you just meet those gems. Otherwise, Anwar, sometimes it's a better, So this time we met a gem, and we're on our way to Al-Azhar, and he asked us, "You're from South Africa?" And he says, "Do you all know, have you all memorized anything from the Quran?" And one of the brothers starts reciting, and he gets more excited. MashaAllah, MashaAllah, means and you read so beautiful, and and he asked us, do you all do anything else? So one of the guys said, "I'm doing the Sab'a Qira'at." So he asked him, "Oh, you're doing the 7 different dialects of recitation. Tell me, where are you now?" And so the student started explaining to him. Tell the Al-Azhar, he was asking, "Did you read in this book? Did you read about this book?" Apparently, this driver knew the 7 dialects of Qira'ah.
Wow.
But
and yes, what you wanted to say, Anwar?
No, go ahead. I'll hit this in later on.
And this is the thing that you see in Egypt. You could come into the masjid, and an old person will come up to you and discuss, maybe tell you that, in your salah, I saw you doing this here. I think so it's better to do it in this way here, and you can have a discussion with it, and they won't feel offended, So you find a lot of people are learned through these lessons which are conducted in the masajid by the scholars, because some of them finish kitabs, some of them are really consistent in attending those programs, So I think so. This is something that we could look at also, where we have, mostly in South Africa or even here in Botswana, for example, once you're done with maktab, and that's before matric, you know, the Islamic studies, where does it, what else after that? You know, so you find people have detached themselves from any type of Islamic studies for the past 15 years, 16 years. Some have even forgotten how to recite Quran, how to, you know, because of that, focusing on now your studies and that. So, you know, that is something which I have observed.
But you see, that detachment is the problem that we're facing. Unfortunately, in our community, when we usually come to think about, you know, education, learning, studying, right? And maybe this is one of the let's say the pitfalls of the age in which we're living in, right? Is that if there's going to be no monetary, let's say, value or profit to whatever you're studying, right? One, I would say, like, let's say the esteem into which it's held within society is much lower, right? Secondly, also, you'll be asked, like, you know, okay, why are you studying? Say you take up a study of something part-time, it will always be, okay, you know, people will have questions about, oh, what you're going to do with it, you know? People just studying things for personal enrichment, right? I'm not saying it's not there. Let's not be so stereotypical. But generally, we don't see, you know, that culture of learning in that sense. So when it comes to even, for example, people in their careers, you know, oftentimes, unless they've been pushed by industry.
We lost Anwar again.
Yeah. So,
Malana, let me ask you, what, in terms of the seeking of knowledge, I'd like to ask you a question, and maybe just one of your teachers, because knowledge comes from, you know, in our Islamic tradition, we have a very strong point around isnad and having a chain of transmission. And I think you were talking about some of this in your introductory comments. But other than that, I'd like to ask one of your most, like, who was your most engaging teacher? Who would you recognize as, and I know you've had many, and we're not saying to the exclusion of others, but can you tell us a bit about one of your teachers? Because these are bearers of knowledge. And I'm not sure if you want to do this, but I'd be interested if you can, because knowledge is brought down by vessels, and those vessels are encapsulated in human bodies with veins and blood. Right. So maybe you can tell us one of your teachers, perhaps.
Okay. So there's quite a few teachers who, alhamdulillah, you know, I've had the honor to engage with, and they also guided me in life. You know, you come from, you know, especially when you're in your Saful Awal, which is in your first year, second year, you have this mentality, this mindset. You know, it's raw. It has all of these, you know. You like brands, and then you have these teachers who slowly make sense of the world for you through their guidance. But I think so. Growing up for me, Marhum Maulana Yunus Daya was really had really a great impact on my Islamic identity. And I'll tell you the reason for this here was that we grew up in Alexandra, and most of my colleagues, most of my friends, or let me say all of my friends in Alex were not Muslim. Right? And now you have after school day free, first of all. Now you want to spend time with your friends, obviously. But now you have madrasa. So you're coming out from school, all of your friends are on their way home, and you looking at the masjid because the masjid was just opposite the school. And you're coming out at about 1:30. Madrasa is going to start at about 2:30, 3 o'clock. Right? First of all, that free time you got nobody to play with, because the other children that come to madrasa, you know, they get dropped off, and you know, so maybe you just have one or two friends. So now you're sitting, you have to wait at the masjid, you've got nothing to do. You could have went home, you know, and now you have to go to madrasa. The worst part was that Saturday, there was madrasa also.
Oh my.
So what that would mean was that on Saturday from Alex, sometimes I didn't have taxi fare money. You have to walk through the First Avenue. So you could get to Marlborough, walking through the First Avenue. There's like a route that you take. It's a nice 10-kilometer stretch walk. And now you either going to choose now. Are you going to put your kurta in your madrasa bag, or are you and then wear it when you reach this thing? Because on the way, you know, you get all of these people just teasing you and making fun or whatever. Or are you just going to walk with your kurta? But anyway, the point that I want to get is that Mulana Yunus Daya kept communication with my mother if I wasn't at madrasa.
Wow.
So if I was absent, my mother would immediately know. And because of that, I had to be present in madrasa.
Wow.
So he involved himself as a father figure in every student's life. But for me, that was a father figure because through that, I got to learn my basics of Quran. I got to learn my basics of your kitabs that you do. And mostly was your Quran, your Quran.
Yeah.
Because once I came to Darul Ulum, you know, it wasn't so difficult. But my foundation and, you know, the challenges that I had, he made it that those challenges, the rules that he set for me to be in class, you know, that was, and I find that, you know, that was my foundation. I mean, that was my identity, because I can attribute and say that in Darul Uloom there were ustads that affected my life and whatever, but I have to say that Maulana Yunus Daya played this role which seems so you know, which seems so small. This was a major identification, whether you liked it or not. You had to be there, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really grant him Jannah, you know, because even when we would meet, and this is one more thing I would mention, that even when we used to go and visit him, and I think so everybody who you meet, if you ask him about him, the first question that he asks you is, how is your mother? How is your father? You know? And the second question would be that, how are you doing? You know, what are you doing now? And he just had this beautiful prophetic character, which, you know, epitomized the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. When we read the seerah, it's so nice to have people who really epitomize and bring to life that which you've read in the seerah, and you see it in this human being. So for me, really, that was, you know, one of answering your question. I think so, Maulana Yunus Daya.
Alhamdulillah. Shukran for sharing that, Maulana. Sayyidi Anwar, you back with us?
Yeah, I'm back. I had more gremlins in the fire, but I don't know what's happening. I don't know. Maulana Zakariya is getting back at me, you know, for
I think so the time we need to
be wrapping up. But
yeah,
as I was saying earlier on, there is this disconnect, you know. We created this division, unfortunately, and we've fallen victim to this, to what is regarded as secular knowledge and what is regarded as Islamic knowledge. Yes, there are other revealed sciences that really makes up, like, let's say, the deen itself, right? But we know the deen is a way of life, and knowledge is the lost property of a Muslim, right? Al-hikmatu talad al-mu'min فحيث وجده أحق بها. Wherever he finds it, he has the most right to it, right? This is in the Sunan of Tirmidhi. Now, that usually was our attitude as a civilization to all types of knowledge. So we took everything and then we started to filter it through our worldview, kept what was useful, modified it, maybe even remodeled it, or discarded it if it did not fit within our worldview. But today we live with a very artificial construct of secular knowledge and then Islamic knowledge, right? To wrap up, and I got cut off when I was talking about this here, is that firstly, there are people who are studying, who have taken the step, the commitment to improve themselves, right, in different ways, right? And they have even gone to the point of, let's say, finding part-time programs, whether it be on-site, right, or online, to learn more about Islam, right? Beyond just the rituals of the faith, but even to dig deeper into the Quran, into the Hadith, into the Seerah, to actually even study the Deen formally, right? Firstly, we must acknowledge these people. We should congratulate them, and we should continue to encourage people to do so, to seek knowledge, because it's a lifelong journey. I'm closing off the podcast tonight. I'd like to say, there are quite a bit. We live in a technological age. Yes, it's always better to have, a teacher or a set of teachers that you are physically in contact with, right? Where you're going for classes, whether it be on the weekend in a class, whether it be like, a weekend Arabic and Islamic studies program, couple of nights a week or on the weekend, whatever, right? It's great to have that, but if you don't, you have other avenues. Sometimes you have, like, let's say, a kind of like a weekend school that takes place maybe once every few months in terms of a course, right? You have institutions that specialize in providing weekend courses, right? You have institutions that specialize in providing online learning. So you have different things going on. You have, let's say, SeekersGuidance by Sheikh Faraz Rabbani, right? And he's done phenomenal work. You have AlKauthar Institute, who hosts a lot of weekend programs in many different parts of the world. Because of, obviously, the pandemic, most people are doing things online. You have groups such as Al-Madinah Institute, right? There's in South Africa, you have Jami'ah Online, and they even have students from outside of South Africa. There's AlMaghrib, there's IIDR, there's Andalus Academy. There's so many different, there's Islamic Online University. There's so many different online platforms that you can use to tap into learning. And you should go out and seek your localized platforms to actually have a relationship with a human being, with a teacher, because knowledge is a matter of, especially when it comes to the Quran and Hadith, it is something that is heart to heart, right? Not that online can't facilitate that. That's will be a very interesting discussion at the later stage. But there's so many avenues and platforms that really we don't have, let's say, an excuse to remain ignorant. Ignorance right now is a choice. Unless your circumstances are so dire that you can't access learning, ignorance is a choice. And as a community, we need to choose to become, let's say, enlightened and educated, and start to see the world more from an Islamic lens, so opposed to secular and Islamic, but more that from the Islamic worldview, we can even see what is, like, let's say, the mundane, what is the scientific, what is the philosophical, what is the economic from an Islamic lens, So I feel, and I think maybe even in the description to this video, when we upload it onto the YouTube link, maybe, whatever suggestions you guys have in terms of learning institutions, from a wide variety of angles, we can just put it out there for people to have a look, so they can go on and improve themselves, because people have done phenomenal things, via part-time study, whether it be contact-based classes or online-based classes, or a mixture of the two. And really, we're talking about Egypt earlier on, because we both had the opportunity of studying there, Sheikh Zakariya, is that, those mosque-based classes, you see them oftentimes throughout the Middle East, right? Where people can study, oftentimes people who are, let's say, ordinary human beings, right? Lay people can be attending classes very, very studiously for many, many years at a time. And let's say their level of Islamic understanding is phenomenal. It's amazing. Like, I made a statement once in Cairo, like, after observing classes and attending them for a while, amongst friends, I said, sometimes walking into the Azhar Mosque, for a part-time class in the evening can be a very intimidating exercise, because you don't know if the person that you're bumping into is dressed in a trouser and a shirt, right? You don't know if that person has been here or in similar environments for the last 20 or 30 years. And they're going to ask you things that and make comments that actually might leave you quite shocked in terms of like, the level of understanding. So you might walk in there as a full-time student of Islamic studies, you're thinking you're speaking to someone who's just taken up a part-time class, but they've been at it for the last 20 or 30 years, and that person, technically speaking, for all intents and purposes, is an alim, is or at least a very serious talib of the deen, and their understanding of Islam can be phenomenal. And in environments like ours, I think for those people who are studying part-time, who have been serious about it, and I know quite a few of them actually, will be amazed at their understanding and their knowledge of Islam, and also basically the type of sacrifices that to make, to acquire that knowledge. Juggling schedules to wake up 3 o'clock in the morning to study, canceling weekend golf games to attend a tafsir program or weekend course, or let's say arranging someone to look after their children while they're gone for an Arabic class twice or thrice a week, at a certain venue. I think we need to commend those people. We need to constantly encourage them, and I think that's part and parcel of the knowledge revolution that's necessary within the Muslim community. Any closing comments, gentlemen?
When you were speaking of walking in the Al-Azhar Masjid and bumping into somebody, I remember the late marhum Sheikh Ihsan Hendrik. We were sitting and he was giving us a lesson, and he mentioned something very funny. He said when they were in Damascus, they were getting off a taxi, and there was this person in the market who was wearing normal sandals, a trouser, and a shirt, and he had a few books in his hand. And one of the scholars that was traveling with them, said to the group, Hassan said that this person just looked normal. And he said, do you know who's that person walking there with those few books in his hand, with the shirt and the trouser? And they said no. And they said, that's Dr. Wahba Zohari.
Subhanallah.
And if you go and search his name, Dr. Wahba Zohari, you will find that he contributed to the Shafi fiqh. He wrote, one of the books that he wrote was this Usul al-Fiqh al-Islami, the roots of Islamic jurisprudence. He wrote Al-Fiqh al-Islam wa Adillatiha, Islamic jurisprudence and its proofs. He wrote many, many, many books contributing towards the Shafi school of thought and on many other subjects. And one of the great scholars of Damascus. And you just got me thinking, where in Egypt, many times you would find yourself actually speaking to a doctor in some field or who's done his PhD, but just a normal, ordinary looking person. And it got me thinking how sometimes in the Newtown Masjid, and this is just this person, he was a new Muslim, but he probably went to a shop or somewhere to buy, he bought a nice scarf, he bought a Saudi jubba, and and these guys wanted to start Salah. They were late for Maghrib, and when they saw him passing, they said, yes, Sheikh. And they called him to come and lead. And he probably was Muslim for about 2 or 3 days, because I saw him when he accepted, and he didn't know what was happening, and he just came and stood, and he didn't know what to do, And so just your point made me think of how just the ordinary people, subhanAllah, in Egypt that you would meet, and you wouldn't be knowing that you're speaking to somebody who was a great scholar of Islam.
Amazing. Really, really amazing. Gentlemen, I think this is where we need to wrap up. But shukran jazilan, it's been an insightful discussion. I think one that we might have to take up again in the future, because knowledge has so much to unpack. So let's look forward to that in future, inshallah. One last thing I'm going to say: there's a very, very fascinating book that just came out right now by Professor Sheikh Jasser Auda. It's called Re-Envisioning Islamic Scholarship. And it has to do really about how he looks at knowledge in total, not just Islamic knowledge, all human fields of activity. And as someone who's a specialist in systems development, he connects all of them together, because he's both an alim of the Sharia and he's a specialist in systems development. His book, the title, I'll share it with you guys, and we need to speak about that maybe sometime in the future. I'm really excited. I started it yesterday and I can't put it down. It's fascinating. But gentlemen, it has been exciting. We'll see you people next week, inshallah. Shukran jazilan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.